All right, let's dive into something truly fascinating today on the deep dive. The surprising environmental footprint of artificial intelligence. AI holds this incredible promise. It's set to revolutionize medicine, accelerate drug discovery, even optimize our energy grids for a decarbonized future. It really feels like an engine of incredible progress. But here's the twist, and it's a big one. This very engine is rapidly becoming a formidable environmental concern, demanding enormous amounts of electricity, water, and, well, raw materials. So for this deep dive, our mission is clear. We're going to unpack the escalating environmental footprint of AI and explore the urgent, innovative strategies needed to make it truly sustainable.
That's right. And this isn't just about making, small tweaks here and there. Our sources reveal that addressing this dilemma requires a holistic, multi-layered strategy. It spans the entire AI lifecycle. We're talking about everything from the elegance of its algorithms to the efficiency of its hardware and right down to the sustainability of the massive data centers that house it all.
And the sources we're drawing from, they provide a really comprehensive, data-driven understanding of this complex landscape. They kind of deconstruct the problem into its core components and systematically evaluate solutions at every layer of the technology stack. So yeah, get ready for some genuinely eye-opening facts that might just reshape how you think about AI.
Okay, so to truly grasp the scale of this issue, let's break down the sheer environmental impact of AI, especially, with the explosion of large-scale generative models. It's pretty staggering when you look at the numbers.
It absolutely is. The core problem really is that AI's current trajectory is marked by an exponential increase in demand for three critical resources: electricity, water, and raw materials. And this isn't just a slight uptick. It's a nonlinear surge that's catching many off guard. Let's start with electricity, maybe, because that's often the first thing people think of. Okay, so a single query to a generative AI chatbot like ChatGPT requires around 2.9 watt-hours of electricity. Now, compare that to a conventional Google search, who's about 0.3 watt-hours.
Wow, that's nearly 10 times more energy per task. Yeah, almost 10 times. And what this really tells us isn't just about individual queries, it's about the sheer cumulative ripple effect of widespread AI adoption. A seemingly small efficiency gap can quickly scale into, well, a national energy challenge. Think about this. If all of Google's 9 billion daily searches were powered by a ChatGPT-like model, we'd be looking at an additional 29.3 terawatt-hours annually.
29.3 terawatt-hours. That's hard to picture. How much is that?
To put that in perspective, that's basically equivalent to Ireland's entire national electricity consumption for a year.
Ireland's entire consumption.
Yeah.
Just from switching Google searches, that's a staggering picture for energy. And what's even more concerning, I guess, is that this rapid growth often relies on existing grids, right? Which are often fossil fuel heavy.
Exactly. That puts AI's expansion in direct conflict with global decarbonization goals.
It really creates this critical tension between technological progress and, well, our climate commitments, doesn't it?
Precisely. And looking globally, data centers, cryptocurrencies, and AI consumed an estimated 460 TWh back in 2022. That was nearly 2% of global demand then. Projections suggest this could more than double by 2026, reaching over 1,000 TWh. That's more than Japan's current electricity consumption.
More than Japan. Wow. And what about here in the U.S.?
In the U.S. specifically, data centers accounted for about 4.4% of the nation's electricity in 2023. Driven by AI, this share could surge to somewhere between 6.7% and 12% by 2028. Some analyses even project it could hit 21% by 2030, once you factor in all the delivery costs and everything.
21%, that's huge. So it's not just the energy, but where that energy comes from that's a problem.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a hidden cost earlier. Are we talking about water here? Is that the next big thing?
We absolutely are. Beyond electricity, there's the significant, often overlooked cost of water. Those high-performance processors and AI models, they generate immense heat, just tons of it. And that requires vast quantities of fresh water for cooling in data centers.
Okay, so how much water are we talking?
Well, a study from UC Riverside estimated that just 10 to 50 prompts with ChatGPT can consume about half a liter of water just for cooling.
Half a liter for maybe 50 questions. That seems like a lot when you scale it up.
It adds up incredibly fast, and we're seeing this reflected in big tech's numbers. In 2022, Google's data centers consumed over 5 million gallons of fresh water, a 20% increase from the year before. Microsoft's water consumption jumped an astounding 34% to nearly 1.7 billion gallons in the same period.
1.7 billion gallons. That's hard to fathom.
These aren't just big numbers, they paint a clear picture. AI's thirst is rapidly turning it into a direct competitor for a vital resource with local communities. especially in already drought-stressed regions. It's happening right now. For instance, in the Dalles, Oregon, Google facilities account for as much as 25% of the city's total water use.
A quarter of the city's water for
Okay.
data centers.
Yep. And in drought-prone Arizona, data centers are straining local supplies that are already under severe pressure. Projections for the future are equally concerning. By 2027, global AI-related water demand could reach between 1.1 and 1.7 trillion gallons annually.
Okay, wait. How much is 1.7 trillion gallons?
That's comparable to California's entire household water use for a year.
The whole state of California's homes. Just for AI cooling. That's truly mind-boggling. So we've got electricity, we've got water. What about the physical components themselves? And what happens to them, the hardware?
Right, the full life cycle footprint. That also includes significant carbon emissions just from manufacturing the stuff and a rapidly accelerating e-waste problem. For instance, training OpenAI's GPT-3 model alone generated approximately 552 metric tons of CO2.
552 tons. What does that equate to in real terms?
That's equivalent to about 125 round-trip flights between New York and Beijing. Or maybe easier to picture, nearly 5 times the lifetime emissions of an average American car, including making the car.
5 cars worth of emissions just to train one model.
Exactly. And then there's the embodied carbon in the hardware itself. The production of GPUs involves mining rare metals, complex fabrication, global transportation, all contributing significant emissions before the chip is even switched on. And this rapid pace of hardware innovation, it fuels a cycle of accelerated obsolescence. Things get outdated super fast.
So we're making these powerful chips, using them for a bit, and then
often they become e-waste. One study estimated that generative AI applications produced 2,600 tons of e-waste in 2023 alone. If current trends continue, this is projected to explode to maybe 2.5 million tons by 2030. It's a bit like buying a new, faster car every year, but then just, throwing the old one away. The upfront energy and carbon investment gets wasted.
that's a really unsustainable cycle.
It really is. And it's crucial to understand a fundamental shift in AI's energy consumption. The primary burden has moved. It's shifted from model creation to model use. Historically, training was the most energy-intensive part, but now, with the widespread adoption of generative AI, the inference phase, that's when a trained model is actually running to generate a response that now accounts for maybe 60 to 80% of total energy consumed by AI systems.
So running the AI day-to-day uses more power than building it in the first place.
Increasingly, yes. And this crossover point where inference emissions surpass training emissions, it's accelerating dramatically. For something like GPT-4, the carbon emissions from just 121 days of serving inference requests can equal its total training emissions.
Just 4 months of use equals the entire training footprint. Wow.
And not all inference tasks are created equal either. Generative tasks like creating text or images are significantly more energy-intensive than discriminative tasks, like classification. Image generation can be like 60 times more energy-intensive than text generation.
60 times.
Yeah, and even within text, complex prompts can be 50 times more carbon-intensive than simple recall. This really highlights the inefficiency of using these huge general-purpose models for everything compared to smaller, task-specific models. Those smaller models can be like 10 times more efficient for something like classification.
That makes sense. Use the right tool for the job.
Exactly. So a critical consideration here is, why is there such a pervasive lack of transparency from major AI developers on these critical metrics? Companies like Meta, Microsoft, OpenAI, they typically don't disclose detailed, standardized data on the resource consumption of their models. Energy, water, carbon, it's often a black box.
And that makes it impossible for anyone, policymakers, researchers, customers, to make informed choices, right?
Precisely. This transparency deficit is arguably the primary obstacle to building a genuinely sustainable AI ecosystem. You can't manage what you can't measure.
Okay. So considering all this, where do we even begin to tackle such a vast challenge? Does it start right there in the software itself?
Absolutely. This brings us to the first major pillar of sustainable AI, making AI models inherently more efficient. It's about moving away from a performance at any cost mentality to one of, let's say, efficiency by design. Many large deep learning models are over-parameterized, meaning they have a lot of redundant components, extra baggage, you could say, and this offers a huge opportunity for optimization through model compression techniques.
Model compression,
Right.
like making them smaller.
Exactly. There are 4 key ways we generally do this. First, pruning, which is kind of like trimming the fat from a neural network. It involves identifying and eliminating unnecessary connections and weights within the model. This directly reduces calculations and makes the model leaner, faster, and more energy efficient, often without losing much accuracy if you do it smartly.
Okay, trim the fat. What's next?
Second, quantization. This is like teaching the model to speak a more efficient language. This technique reduces the numerical precision of model parameters, usually from complex 32-bit floating point numbers down to simpler 8-bit integers. This means it takes up less memory and runs significantly faster and more energy efficiently, especially on specialized hardware.
So less detail in the numbers, but still gets the job done.
Kind of, yeah. Think of it like taking a super high-resolution photograph and converting it to a smaller file size. You lose a tiny bit of fine detail, maybe, but it's much smaller and faster to load and often good enough.
Wow.
Those open-source formats like ggml and gguf are great examples of this in action. They allow surprisingly efficient inference even on regular consumer hardware.
Right, I've heard of those. Okay, pruning, quantization, what's number 3?
Third is knowledge distillation. This one's about learning from a master. Here, you train a smaller, more efficient student model to mimic the nuanced behavior, the dark knowledge, of a larger, pre-trained teacher model. The big advantage is that the student model can have a completely different, much more efficient architecture, maybe optimized for specific hardware, but it still benefits from the powerful insights learned by the big teacher model.
So passing the knowledge down to a leaner apprentice. Makes sense. And the last one.
And finally, we have efficiency by design through totally novel neural network architectures. These are models built from the ground up to be efficient. For example, EfficientNet achieves top-tier accuracy, but with significantly fewer parameters by intelligently scaling different dimensions of the network, its depth, width, and the image resolution it uses. But perhaps the most revolutionary approach here is spiking neural networks, or SNNs.
Spiking neural networks, that sounds different.
It is. They're inspired directly by how the brain works. SNNs are event-driven. Neurons only fire and consume power when they actually need to process a piece of information, a spike. This sparse asynchronous processing can lead to dramatic energy reductions. We're talking potentially 100 to 1,000 times more efficient than traditional artificial neural networks, ANNs. They are basically the software foundation for neuromorphic hardware, which we should definitely get into next.
That's fascinating. It really emphasizes, though, that there's no single best method here, is there? Each technique probably has a trade-off, right? Between efficiency and accuracy, or maybe robustness. It sounds like a complex decision matrix for developers.
Absolutely. It's always a balancing act. And this complexity underscores a broader strategic shift in the field. We're moving, or need to move, from what's sometimes called red AI, that's the pursuit of state-of-the-art accuracy at any computational cost, green AI, where efficiency is elevated to a primary metric of success, evaluated right alongside traditional performance benchmarks like accuracy. The immense resource costs we talked about, they're making red AI both economically and environmentally untenable. It's forcing a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Future breakthroughs will likely be judged not only by what they can achieve, but by the computational costs, the energy, the water, the carbon at which they achieve it.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Let's turn our attention then to the hardware layer, the physical silicon that powers AI, because that's where the real power is consumed, right? And you mentioned some incredible innovation happening there too.
Indeed. The processors themselves are a primary determinant of energy consumption. This is driving a huge innovation race where performance per watt is really the key metric now. The current AI hardware landscape is dominated by GPUs, graphics processing units, mainly led by NVIDIA, and custom-designed TPUs, tensor processing units from Google. These chips have just staggering performance, but they also have pretty alarming power consumption figures. NVIDIA's flagship H100 GPU, for instance, consumes up to 700 watts.
700 watts for one chip.
Yep. And its upcoming successor, the Blackwell chip, is expected to draw 1,200 watts per chip. So a single server packed with 8 of these GPUs could theoretically consume over 5.6 kilowatts.
That's like running several hairdryers simultaneously, nonstop, just in one server box.
Pretty much. So in response to these escalating power demands, the key metric for evaluating AI hardware is shifting. It's moving from just raw performance like FLOPS to energy efficiency, often expressed as performance per watt, or FOPS per watt. On this front, TPUs often show superior energy efficiency for specific machine learning workloads. They can deliver maybe 2 to 3 times better performance per watt compared to contemporary GPUs. Google's TPU v4, for example, improved performance by watt by 2.7x over its predecessor, while typically consuming only around 200 W per chip.
So Google's custom chips are quite a bit more power frugal for AI tasks.
For many AI tasks, yes. In fact, Google's latest TPUs have shown about a threefold improvement in carbon efficiency over just 4 years. That's rapid progress. And it's not just the processor. Innovations in high bandwidth memory, like HBM3E, and next-gen system memory, like DDR5, are also crucial for reducing the energy spent just moving data around within the server. That data movement is a big energy hog, too. And for edge devices, like what you'd find in a smart camera or a drone-specialized hardware like FPGAs and ASICs, can be maybe 5 times more energy efficient than general-purpose GPUs for specific tasks.
Okay, so specialized chips are getting better, but you mentioned something even more radical, neuromorphic computing, mimicking the brain.
Yeah, that's perhaps the most radical departure from traditional computing. Neuromorphic computing aims to build chips that directly mimic the structure and function of the brain. Unlike standard chips where memory and processing are separate, neuromorphic chips co-locate memory and processing, and they operate using those spiking neural networks we talked about. This brain-inspired, event-driven approach offers potentially extraordinary gains in energy efficiency. Why? Because much of the chip can remain in a very low-power state, only activating when a spike of information actually needs processing.
So it's only working when it absolutely needs to.
Exactly. Intel's Loihi 2 research chip, for instance, consumes up to 1,000 times less power than traditional AI chips for certain workloads, and IBM's older True North chip used just 70 milliwatts. That's incredibly low power. This makes neuromorphic tech ideal for power-constrained edge AI applications. Think autonomous drones, robotics, smart sensors, wearables.
Who's working on this? Is it just Intel and IBM?
They're big players, along with Qualcomm, but there are also specialized companies jumping in, like BrainChip, Synsense, Inotera, Aspera Semi. It's a growing field. However, we should be clear, it's still quite nascent. It requires completely new software tools, new ways of thinking about programming, and it lacks standardization. Manufacturing is also still a challenge.
So promising, but maybe not mainstream tomorrow. Are there other future hardware ideas bubbling up?
Definitely. Looking further ahead, researchers are exploring even more speculative but potentially game-changing hardware paradigms. One is compute and memory, or CAM. This aims to perform computations directly within the memory arrays, drastically minimizing that energy-intensive data transfer between memory and processor. IBM demonstrated a nearly 40-fold improvement in energy efficiency with an experimental CIM chip.
Computing in the memory.
Ah.
Interesting. What else?
Another area is photonics. This seeks to replace electrons with photons, particles of light, for computation. Light travels faster and with less energy loss, potentially enabling highly parallel operations at incredible speeds with very low energy. A recent 2024 paper even showed using inexpensive LEDs for optical neural networks.
Using light instead of electricity. Very sci-fi. And
Yes.
quantum. Does that fit in?
Quantum computing is definitely on the horizon, though still speculative for broad AI applications. But it promises exponentially faster solutions for specific complex problems like optimization or materials simulation, potentially with a fraction of the energy. We're talking supercomputer megawatts versus quantum computer kilowatts for certain tasks. Cornell researchers even proposed a hybrid quantum classical framework that could potentially reduce data center energy consumption by up to 12.5%.
It's incredible, really, to see how sustainability is no longer just a secondary consideration, like a nice to have. It seems like it's becoming a primary driver of hardware innovation. The physical constraints of power delivery and heat dissipation in data centers have become a fundamental engineering bottleneck, haven't they?
That's exactly it. The next great leap in AI performance might just come directly from breakthroughs in energy efficiency itself.
It's fascinating how those are linked.
Precisely. The truly intriguing part is that this isn't just about doing good for the environment. It's increasingly about pushing the boundaries of what's technologically possible in the first place.
Okay, so we've covered software efficiency and hardware innovation. But what's perhaps even more striking is that no matter how efficient the AI model or the chip is, the physical home of AI, the data center, is crucial. Let's look at how the big players, the cloud providers, are trying to make their actual operations sustainable.
Right. This third pillar is all about how we power, cool, and manage these massive data centers with minimal environmental impact. The most direct way to decarbonize AI operations is, of course, to power them with clean energy. And the major cloud providers, Amazon Web Services, AWS, Google Cloud Platform, GCP, and Microsoft Azure, are now the world's largest corporate purchasers of renewable energy. all have committed to 100% renewable power goals.
Are they meeting those goals?
They're making significant progress. Amazon, for example, matched 100% of its electricity consumption with renewable energy purchases in 2023, which was actually 7 years ahead of its original goal. They achieved this primarily through large-scale power purchase agreements, or PPAs. These contracts essentially fund the construction of new wind and solar farms, adding new clean energy capacity to the grid. This is supplemented by things like on-site solar, geothermal energy, and even nuclear energy. Amazon signed its first nuclear energy PPA in 2024.
Nuclear power for data centers. Interesting.
Yeah, it's about getting reliable, carbon-free baseload power. Google is pushing an even more ambitious goal, 247 carbon-free energy, CFE. Their aim is to match their energy consumption with clean energy generation on an hourly basis in every single region they operate in by 2030. That's much harder than just matching annual consumption. And to help customers participate, they offer tools like Google's Region Picker, which allows users to choose cloud regions that currently have cleaner energy mixes for running their workloads.
That's a huge step forward, powering these behemoths with clean energy. But then there's the heat, right? We talked about the water use for cooling. How are they tackling that massive cooling challenge?
It's a massive challenge, absolutely. The immense heat pouring off these dense AI servers has made traditional air cooling methods increasingly insufficient and inefficient. This has driven a significant shift toward liquid-based cooling, which is far more effective at heat transfer and can be more energy efficient overall. Two primary technologies are gaining traction. Direct-to-chip cooling, where chilled liquids circulates through cold plates attached directly to the hottest components like the GPU or CPU.
Like a mini radiator on
Right.
a chip itself.
Exactly. And the other is immersion cooling, where entire servers are literally submerged in a special non-conductive fluid. This provides total uniform cooling. Companies like Schneider Electric and Vertiv are major players developing these systems.
Submerging servers. Sounds extreme, but I guess it works. But doesn't liquid cooling still use a lot of water, potentially?
Traditionally, many liquid cooling systems still rely on evaporative cooling towers, which consume water. But addressing this, Microsoft has announced groundbreaking plans for zero-water data centers. This innovative design uses a closed-loop, chip-level liquid cooling system. It continuously recycles a fixed amount of coolant, potentially just water, without any loss to evaporation. This is projected to save an estimated 125 million liters of water annually per data center compared to traditional methods. They plan to pilot this in Arizona and Wisconsin starting around 2026.
Zero water use for cooling. That's a game changer, especially in places like Arizona.
It fundamentally decouples data center growth from local water stress, which is a huge deal, yeah. Sustainable data center operations also demand a holistic focus on efficiency, measured by standardized metrics. We often hear about power usage effectiveness, or PUE.
Right, PUE. That measures the overhead energy,
Yeah.
right? Like for cooling and lighting.
Exactly. A perfect PUE is 1.0, meaning all power goes to the IT equipment. Major cloud providers like Google, reporting around 1.09, Microsoft, less than 1.1, and AWS, around 1.22, have achieved world-class PUEs. This makes their cloud infrastructure potentially up to 4.1 times more energy efficient than typical private on-premise data centers, which often average a PUE of 1.84 or higher. Similarly, there's water usage effectiveness, or WUE, which measures water efficiency in liters used per kilowatt hour of IT energy. Microsoft, for example, has reduced its global average WEE down to 0.30 L kilowatt.
So they're tracking and improving both power and water overhead.
Yes, and leading operators are also embracing a circular economy approach to their hardware. This means designing server racks for easier repair and reuse, actively working to extend the operational life of equipment, and establishing robust recycling programs for when gear finally reaches end of life. In 2023, AWS reported diverting something like 14.6 million hardware components from landfills through these kinds of programs. It's about thinking beyond just consumption to the entire life cycle of the hardware.
That's really important. So thinking about AI again, AI itself is part of the problem in terms of energy and resources. But can it also be part of the solution in managing these massive, complex data centers?
Exactly. That's a really powerful synergistic feedback loop that's emerging. AI itself is becoming one of the most effective tools for enhancing data center sustainability. Operators are deploying sophisticated machine learning models to manage and optimize their complex infrastructure in real time. Google, for example, famously used its DeepMind AI years ago to predict cooling needs and adjust settings, reducing cooling energy consumption by about 40% in its data centers.
Using AI to make the data center smarter about saving energy.
Precisely. AI is also used for intelligent workload management, automatically shifting non-urgent computing tasks to times of day when renewable energy is abundant on the grid, or to geographic regions with cleaner energy mixes. And it's used for predictive maintenance, analyzing sensor data from servers to anticipate hardware failures before they happen. This extends component life and reduces e-waste.
That's a fantastic application of AI itself.
It is, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, what you see is cloud providers actively productizing sustainability. They're turning it into a competitive differentiator and a value-added service for their customers. Tools like Google's Region Picker or Azure's Sustainability Calculator, alongside the marketing of their energy-efficient custom silicon, it all shows that providers are competing on who can best help their customers achieve their own environmental, social, and governance (ESG) goals. This creates a really powerful market incentive for continued innovation in sustainable operations.
That makes sense. Competition driving green innovation. Okay, so when we zoom out again to the really big picture, what are the biggest challenges that cut across all these solutions? Software, hardware, infrastructure. What still stands in the way of truly sustainable AI?
Well, true sustainable AI needs more than just clever technological solutions. It really needs to confront some deeper issues around economic incentives, performance trade-offs, and, crucially, systemic governance. At the heart of it, there's this fundamental tension we keep bumping up against: the relentless pursuit of higher model accuracy versus the growing imperative for greater efficiency. Historically, a better AI model simply meant higher performance, higher accuracy, often assuming almost unlimited computational resources were available or justified. Now, the critical question is becoming, at what cost is that accuracy achieved?
Right. Do we always need the absolute best performance regardless of the energy bill?
Exactly. A model used for critical medical diagnosis might absolutely need 99.9% accuracy, and the resource costs might be justified. But maybe an e-commerce recommendation engine could tolerate slightly lower accuracy if it meant significantly better energy efficiency. This calls for that shift to the green AI movement we mentioned, where efficiency is elevated to a primary metric of success alongside accuracy. It's about achieving the required level of performance for a specific task with the minimum possible environmental footprint, finding that optimal balance for each use case.
Finding the good enough point, maybe for less critical tasks.
In a way, yes. Another significant economic and environmental risk we need to consider is something known as the Jevons Paradox.
Jevons Paradox. Remind me what that is.
The basic theory, which dates back to the 19th century and coal use, suggests that as technological improvements make using a resource more efficient, the cost of using that resource drops. This drop in cost can then spur such a dramatic increase in demand for the resource that total consumption actually increases, completely negating the initial efficiency savings.
Ah, right. So if AI gets cheaper and easier to run because it's more efficient,
then it becomes more accessible and economically viable for more applications, potentially leading to an explosion in its use across every industry. We might just use way more of it. Microsoft's CEO has even framed this potential explosion in demand, driven by efficiency, as a positive driver for economic growth.
which then begs the question we touched on. If we make it super efficient, will we just end up using vastly more AI overall, potentially worsening the total impact? Is technological efficiency on its own actually enough?
You've hit on the core challenge there. Technological efficiency on its own is likely not enough. It absolutely needs to be paired with conscious policies and strategies to manage overall consumption growth. The good news is the paradox isn't some immutable law of nature. Factors like market saturation, the sheer capital expenditure needed to build AI infrastructure, and critically, policy choices can moderate or even counteract it. But we have to be intentional about it.
So policy becomes really critical.
Hugely critical. Another recurring challenge, which we also touched on earlier, is that pervasive lack of transparency. Many leading AI developers still don't publicly disclose detailed, standardized information about their models' energy consumption, water usage, or carbon footprint. This transparency deficit is a major roadblock.
Because users can't make informed, environmentally conscious choices.
Exactly. You can't choose the greener model if you don't know which one it is. The solution getting traction is the idea of a standardized AI bill of materials, or AI BUM. Similar to a software bill of materials, SBAM, which lists software components, an AI BOM would be a formal standardized record documenting a model's key environmental footprint metrics. There are already tools emerging to help with this, like Code Carbon and the MLCO2 calculator for developers to estimate emissions during training, and Cloud Carbon Footprint for organizations to monitor their cloud emissions. And industry benchmarks like MLPerf, which compare model performance, are also starting to incorporate power and energy measurements, which is a really positive step.
So we need transparency and standards. What about governance? How do we actually manage this?
Finally, yeah, charting a truly sustainable course requires robust governance at multiple levels. At the organizational level, within companies using or developing AI, machine learning operations, or MLOps, platforms are becoming essential. These platforms can help operationalize sustainability. They can automate resource optimization, manage model versions to easily retire inefficient older models, and integrate carbon monitoring tools directly into the development pipeline. It makes sustainability a managed, trackable process.
Making green part of the standard workflow.
Exactly. It demands a holistic life cycle approach, thinking about sustainability from conception to deployment to retirement. Then, at the societal level, governments need to step up with sustainability-linked AI policies. This could include things like setting maximum carbon footprint thresholds for certain AI applications, offering tax incentives for developing and deploying verifiable green AI, and maybe even mandating transparent reporting via those AI bombs we talked about. There's a fundamental dichotomy emerging here, really. One path views efficiency primarily as a means to lower costs and drive more economic growth. You might call it sustainability as a feature. The other path, championed by the green AI movement, prioritizes achieving absolute reductions in environmental impact, even if it means rethinking unchecked expansion. The choice society makes between these two paths is going to be critical.
Wow, this deep dive really lays bare that fundamental paradox, doesn't it? It makes you wonder how we can possibly balance such incredible technological progress with these escalating environmental costs. But it also highlights, I think, a clear integrated path forward. Sustainable AI requires this concerted, holistic effort across software, hardware, and infrastructure. That's kind of a virtuous cycle, isn't it? More efficient algorithms reduce the load on the hardware,
Which allows for lower power hardware designs
which in turn lessens the burden on the data centers.
that are ideally powered by clean energy and cooled efficiently. It all connects.
Yeah, it all has to work together.
Exactly. But achieving that cycle requires a really conscious and deliberate shift in priorities and incentives across the entire AI ecosystem. It won't happen automatically. So for policymakers, the takeaway is probably mandate radical transparency, demand those AI bombs, and actively incentivize green AI innovation over just raw performance. For industry leaders, it's about genuinely competing on sustainability, not just performance. It means investing in that next-gen efficient hardware like neuromorphic chips and truly embracing the circular economy for hardware life cycles. For the AI developers actually building the models, it's adopting a green AI mindset right from the start, using measurement tools by default, publishing efficiency metrics alongside accuracy scores, and for the enterprise adopters, the companies using AI, it means demanding that transparency from their vendors, leveraging MLOs tools for sustainability governance within their own operations, and consciously choosing the right, most efficient tool for each job, rather than just reflexively reaching for the biggest, most powerful model available.
That's a great summary of the action points. It really underscores that the trajectory of artificial intelligence isn't set in stone. It's not predetermined. It will be shaped by the conscious choices made today by researchers, by companies, by governments, and by society as a whole. And maybe the most critical trade-off we face isn't just between accuracy and efficiency inside the machine. It might be the larger trade-off between unchecked, short-term economic expansion fueled by AI and the long-term imperative of ecological viability for the planet that supports it all. So for you listening, what will you do with this knowledge? What stands out to you most from this deep dive? Something to think about.